The Paterno name. It is synonymous with Penn State football, and even though Joe Pa is no longer with us, Jay Paterno joins the podcast to talk about the state of Penn State, the state of college football, what the answer is, and yes, he lays it all out there in clean detail for us. He joins Neil and I today on Scouting the League. Everybody, and welcome to Scouting the League, a really fun conversation with Jay Paterno, Board of Trustees, current Penn State guy, Jay Paterno. Really, really fun. He does not hold any punches on the state of college football, what he thinks the answer is. He will go where a lot of people won't. So again, we're going to get to that shortly. Before we do, make sure you head over, like, subscribe, share this podcast wherever you are listening or watching. That Apple Podcast, Spotify, or YouTube. Hit those buttons. Most importantly, share this with a friend. If you're a Penn Stater, you're going to like a lot of this. If you are maybe unsure about where college football is going to go, this one has all the pieces you need to know. Again, lays it out there exactly the way you need to know it. So make sure you share it with a friend. Go give myself a follow. I am Rodrik David at Right Step ADV is where you can find me. Neil Stratton is at Inside the League, of course. RSAFootball.com is my website. InsideTheLeague.com is where you can find Neil. Make sure you check out everything he has to offer in the Friday wrap as well, and follow us on all those social medias. Make sure you check our partners over at BlueMaca.com. Use code SCOUTING20 when you order those insoles, whether it's for performance, that non-slip insole, plantar fascia, or that ever annoying turf toe. Make sure you order those carbon fiber insoles. Improve your performance just by putting those insoles in there over at BlueMaca.com. And then head on over, check out inactiveco.com to improve your sleep. Our conversation with Jill and Lori goes over how important sleep is. Again, improve your performance just by throwing on the right gear and that nice sleep mask. Check it out all over at inactiveco.com. Upcoming guests, podcasts all over the place, whether it is stepping into the draft room, talking to friends like Dane Brugler, Jay Paterno, Gary Zauner coming up. Always enjoy jumping into the world of football, but we will get into it today with Jay Paterno. So without further ado, let's get into it. Well, Jay Paterno, welcome to Scouting the League.
Great to be here. Looking forward to it.
You know, there's never a better time to have a Penn Stater on the podcast. Again, there's a few things going on up in the state. And again, a blue blood program, you know, a man that has been with the program, a part of the program, coaching, now a trustee. I mean, you're going to have insight that few have. And we'll get to the state of Penn State. And again, everything going on up there. But again, let's talk. You coached for 21 years, not only at Penn State, but a number of stops along the way. Penn State, of course, most recently. You're now a 3-time author and doing a bunch of things outside football. What is a daily life for Jay Paterno look like right now?
Depends on the day of the week. Like, we tape our show Nittany Game Week tomorrow. So this morning and last night was working on, writing the scripts because I'm co-creator of the show. So we're doing a scouting report in Ohio State. We got Greg McElroy's coming on the show, do the interview. I mean, all different kinds of stuff. So every week Monday, Tuesday's the show. Wednesday, I'm writing stuff for the weekend, doing other stuff. I mean, just trying to catch up with everything. So it all depends on what day of the week I'm in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's nothing like coaching. There's nothing like being a part of a team. How different has it been? Again, not just your coaching career, but your life had been around not just football, but really that Penn State program. How hard is it some days to not be coaching? Is it still something that you get the itch for sometimes?
Oh, there's no question. Every time that somebody loses a game, and I don't mean just Penn State. I sit there and go, oh, why didn't they should have done this? Should have done it. You can't let it go, and I can't watch a game without coaching it in terms of What would I do here? Because that's how I was when I coached. You were always trying to, and I think that's something that a lot of younger coaches don't do right now. They're not playing the what I call time. They don't watch the game with a purpose. They'll watch a game, and I learned that from Joe. Joe constantly was playing the games. There's a guy Tom Quinn who was longtime special teams coordinator for the Giants, and he and I coached together at James Madison University, and we had an off week, and we're at Penn State for a game in '94, and Colorado's lined up to throw a Hail Mary. And Tom Quinn tells the story to this day. He goes, I'll never forget. He said, Joe said, you better get a rush on him because you can't let the guy stand back there and have all day. And literally 10 seconds after that came out of Joe's mouth, Michigan three-man rushes. They throw the ball down and they win the game. So, I mean, it's constant with that. And you could never, anybody that's coached never loses that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, it's from the scouting perspective. It is one of those things that for college players and even pros to a certain degree, so many of that second level thinking, game situations, we see it at the college level. It's all done from the sideline. As soon as the play's done, you're looking over there. So not only for coaching but players, that's a huge part of it. And you're now a Penn State trustee, and there's a few things going on up at Penn State. You're talking about getting ready for the Ohio State game. Just a couple weeks ago, man, everybody was gearing up for maybe a number one versus number two matchup, premier programs, which it still is, but it's got a different feel to it. So again, James Franklin is out. There's a big buyout that is being negotiated. Talk about the state of Penn State right now. Obviously, again, a blue blood premier program that this is a James Franklin was a good coach for a long time, never quite got there. Again, I always hate to see the after the fact stuff come out. Like, again, if you didn't hear about it when he was at Penn State, again, I believe very little of it. Again, he did a lot for that program. Talk about the state of Penn State right now.
Well, in a matter of, I mean, there's a book in there somewhere. Penn State's down 17-3 to Oregon, number three in the country. The students start chanting "Fire Franklin." We score the next 21 points and have Oregon fourth down, a yard and a half. We stop them, we win the game in the first overtime, and we don't. And 16 days, 15 days later, James Franklin's out of a job after a surprising loss to UCLA and a loss to Northwestern. And he's gone. And so, the thing about firing somebody, the early signing day has really, I'll never forget 15, 16 years ago, we were in a staff meeting. We were talking about it, would we support an early signing day? And a bunch of coaches said, well, these kids are committed. We may as well sign them in December. And I'll never forget, Joe looked at us and says, you guys just make sure you understand what you're unleashing. He said, you'll be having visits in the summer, which will ruin your summer. And the pressure to fire coaches will start in September and October because of the recruiting class. And that's what's happened. And so, Penn State right now, you're in a coaching search. You also have to think about how you're going to shoulder the burden of a $49 million and change buyout, and how you're going to restructure your football budget to pay that. I mean, some of it's going to depend on what James Franklin does, but it's not, but on top of that, you have two coordinators that have multi-year contracts. One is owed 3.2 million still, or excuse me, 6.2 million. The other one 3.8. So now you're potentially looking at 59 million in buyouts. And I think, as a trustee with a fiduciary responsibility in the university, the schools around the country have gotten very irresponsible with their money. And I think if you, in talking to some people at some other schools, you're starting to see some trustees starting to say, hey, we've left this up to the presidents and the ADs too much. It might be time for us to start looking at the spending and that kind of stuff.
I mean, Jay, Rodrik and I, we do this podcast not for the fans, and that's probably reflected in our number of impressions and views and all those kind of things, but we're happy with that. We have accepted our fate. This is for people who work in football, all right? But fans have an unmistakable impact on the game, obviously, and they're probably more invested than they ever have been, and maybe a little more educated, but at the same time, probably more impatient. Is there any way to satisfy fans who are used to, who want instant gratification in a game, even when a guy like so many coaches that have been around and have had success and they're here today and gone tomorrow. I think we're at 8 P4 vacancies right now, maybe more. Is there any way to level with fans and say, listen, guys, this is the way it's got to be. Here are the numbers. Here's the money that's invested. Here's the success that he's had previously. Here's where we could be in a few weeks. I mean, I guess I'm asking a rhetorical question, but I mean, is there any way that today's modern coach can kind of head off the impact that fans are having? Sometimes misplaced impact on their.
You got to win every game. It's that simple. Win every game and win the playoff and go 16 and up. No, I think a couple things. The spread of gambling has got fans far more invested, and I don't use that, no pun intended. No pun intended. They're more invested in the outcome. It's not even a matter of whether you win or whether you cover now. I mean, if you win every game by one, there's going to be somebody unhappy because you didn't cover on 7 or 8 or 9 of those games, and it cost me money. So that's part of it. The expectation level with the playoff now, everybody thinks it's, you got to win national championship every year or be in the playoff or that kind of thing. And Alabama kind of spoiled everybody. But, look at Kalen DeBoer, a year ago at this time, they wanted him gone. Now he's number 4 in the country. In fact, 8 weeks ago when we lost to Florida State, they want him gone.
Yeah.
There's with NIL and with all the money, we've professionalized the game, right or wrong. That's the reality. So when Drew Aller doesn't play the way he should, people say, well, they're more critical than they've been because he's making all this money and James Franklin's making all this money or Brian Kelly's making all this money. They should be winning every game. And I think we've got to get to a point where it's going to take some leadership in terms of athletic directors and presidents and trustees, because sometimes trustees are the biggest problem. They're impatient as anybody. But this summer at Penn State, I could see this coming because the expectation machine just got way ahead of where the team actually was last year to where, we got everybody back. We're just going to walk to a national championship. If we don't get there, James got to go. And I thought it was just a setup for failure all along, hoping I was wrong all along, but it made me nervous because I come from a coaching, all the guys I coached with, whether it was George Welsh at Virginia or Joe at Penn State, all they did was downplay expectations. We're going to stink. I mean, my freshman year at Penn State, we're coming off 11-1, playing for the national championship, got everybody back, and Joe starts with, well, we're not going to be very good this year.
Yeah, that doesn't play quite in the media, again, the national media, where that soundbite, again, you're talking the right way to do it. Again, that is the great head coaches manage their expectations in the building while, again, tempering them on the outside with the right, and again, something, again, if you want to point to a guy like Bill Belichick, again, maybe he's lost his touch there, but did that in New England for lots of years. Obviously Joe, when, again, even Urban Meyer did it for all the years. So again, certainly something. But Jay, you made the point, you talked about it, and you've gone all the way up. It's not just, again, for college programs, GM, head coach, or AD, president, but now trustees. In the day and age where, again, we're not hiding behind, it's intercollegiate athletics. It's a business, and it's being run like a business. It's being run in a lot of ways more and more like a professional franchise, with ownership, again, kind of being obsolete. Again, football programs are making money. Who's making those decisions on where the money goes? The head coach, largely. But again, now we're kind of getting past that, where it's got to be a higher level. You talk about the trustees. And at the same time, these conferences are looking for private equity money to fund it all. So how, in your view, maybe how is Penn State working on it? What's going to be the right way to set up a professional model where everything is not on the head coach and GM of the college program, knowing how much at the university it affects?
Well, I think right now what's happening is you have ADs that jump around every couple of years. You got presidents that are jumping around every couple of years like never before. So to set up the right model, for lack of any other term, you're going to need a constitutional convention where everybody gets together and says, this is the model for college sports going forward. Because right now, what's going on in college football and college sports is not sustainable. You look at Penn State, And we are one of the halves when it comes to financial. We're top 10 in terms of athletic department finances. Yet we're barely breaking even, sometimes losing money on college athletics every year. And that was last year before you added 20 million in revenue sharing, 10 million for the House settlement. And then we're in the middle of a $700 million renovation of the stadium, which will be a $42.5 million debt service for the next 30 years. So now we're going to have potentially $72 million in new expenses when we're breaking even. So where does that money come from? And that's why you see the Big Ten has obviously been into it's been out reported that they've been in some discussions about a private capital deal. But one of the trustees of Michigan made a point in their public meeting. He said, we shouldn't be borrowing our way out of a spending problem because the spending problem is still going to be there. And he's 100% right. And that's really what we got to look at now is the salaries, the buyouts, the things that we're doing. And now the NIL money, we haven't talked about the NIL money, and some of that's coming from, if a company sponsors, if Penn State signs a sponsorship deal with Pepsi, now we're going to take a chunk of the Pepsi money and use it for our players. So there's all kinds of things. And that, by the way, that's a hypothetical, but I mean, those are the kind of things you're going to start to see. So what does that business model look like? Well, the people that have the fiduciary responsibility, the trustees have got to get involved, but not get into who the quarterback should be, who you should be recruiting, who the coach should be, get rid of this guy or that guy, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
In the era of the $50 million buyout, and number one, do you see that as the cost of doing business now if you're in P4 athletics, number one? And number two, does this make private equity inevitable on the P4 level?
Number one, I think that is the cost of doing business right now until some people have the guts to tell somebody no. Barry Alvarez when he was AD, never had a major buyout because he just said, guess what? You either want to be here, you don't want to be here. And the years he was AD, they averaged 10.2 wins a year, which is really good at Wisconsin. They would certainly take that right now, as would most schools. But everybody now, you've got fans that say, you got to hire this guy, that guy. I mean, the names of the people that people want at Penn State. I mean, if God himself was a candidate, some people would bitch that he's too old. I mean, that's where we're at right now. But it is the cost of business. Now, can it change? Yeah, it should change. Because the reality is I think what's coming is private equity is probably getting it involved at some point. What that's going to look like, I think that's for other people to decide right now, or at least throw up some ideas. But I think the reality is the House settlement that put us in the current state is going to be obsolete the next time a 10th grader says, well, next great running back says, I'm not party to the salary cap that you've imposed. I'm suing, and they're going to win. So until you have a collective bargaining, until you have a union with the college athletes, you're still going to be guessing, and you need to get that settled because otherwise you're just going to be reacting to every new lawsuit.
Is that the answer? Again, we've had GMs on, and again, it's kind of nobody wants it. There is the other side of that CBA that, hey, you're now an employee, which means, again, a lot of athletes you don't think about it. You don't want to talk about all that stuff. But is that the solution that's going to be out there in your mind?
Yeah. I mean, the number of ADs and people I've talked to that will say privately it's got to end up there versus those that'll say it publicly. I mean, it's like 100 will say it privately and none will say it publicly. That's just, we got to be realistic about what we are. I mean, we're bringing in $1.1 billion in media rights for the Big Ten this year, or 1.2, whatever it is in that neighborhood. This isn't an extracurricular activity with student athletes playing for dear old state. Let's stop pretending what it is. There's an old joke that guy used to tell me. He said, the woman goes into a confession and she says, bless me, Father, it's been, however long since I've sinned. And I had sex with someone who was not my husband for $100,000. And the priest says, well, would you have done it for 10,000? And she says, what kind of person do you think I am? And he says, oh, we know what kind of person you are. It's just a matter of what the price is. And that's where college athletics are. We are that. I mean, we are saying, oh, we're doing certain things for this. Truth of the matter is, you can't be partly pregnant. I mean, we're now a professional sports enterprise, whether we like it or not, and just own it and let's get on with it.
Yeah. I mean, that's
So
that.
we all agree, Jay, that this is a big money venture, and you've got to pay to
I
play.
mean, I don't particularly like it. I'm just being realistic.
No, that's not what I said. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Does G5 football have a future?
Yeah, I think so, but I think it's going to be a question of, what does that look like? I don't know. There's going to be a lot of pressure to take certain teams and make a super league and kind of cut those people off. I think that's bad for the game. I think ideally, if we could come up with a national. I mean, if you go back to the early '80s when the Supreme Court first broke up the television monopoly that the NCAA had on college football, and all of a sudden it became the conferences. There was a group of conferences, including the independent schools like Penn State, Notre Dame, Miami. All those Eastern independents got together and put together a thing called the College Football Association, and the distribution of those went national of the fees. And then if you played on a national game, you got some money, a certain type of money, and what they got for those games actually went up, doubled and tripled in terms of what the networks were paying. So it was good for everybody, but it kept everybody on a much more level playing field, and it kept the game healthy all over the country. I mean, why are USC, Oregon, UCLA, and Washington the Big Ten? Because they need the money. They need the check. Whereas if it was distributed more equitably among all the conferences, the Pac-12 could go be in the Pac-12, and we could get back to where it belongs. As much as I like seeing Penn State play Oregon, that kind of stuff, I mean, when you look at all the other sports, Oregon's volleyball team's coming out the East Coast 2 or 3 times a year. It's crazy where we're at.
It's not sustainable. Again, we all
No.
know that, and that's the reality of it. It's not sustainable. We all know it's not going to stay this way. What is going to be, again, it's right now it's throw it in a can, shake it up, throw it out, and see how it reacts this year in the courts, and then let's try it again in another year. Leadership, the right governing body, like, how do we get there? What's like the first step, the first 2 steps to get to where, hey, we can start to come back to the right equilibrium?
Well, what's funny is maybe 6, 7 months ago, whatever it was, there was this big thing about this new enforcement regime and this new kind of, we're going to have all these rules. And the Big Ten is not signed on because they don't think schools should be sanctioned. And that, that's not, I'm not passing judgment on that, but this was all touted as the answer. And sooner or later, all of a sudden it's like, well, schools shouldn't have postseason bans if they're caught doing certain things. It's not fair. So, we can't even agree on that. So I think it's going to take some people, and it does not look like it's going to come from presidents of universities. It does not look like it's come from ADs or football coaches because they're all worried about the jobs. Whereas, if you went back, I talked about the early 80s, guys like Tom Osborne and Joe Paterno and guys like that would get together and say, what's good for the game? Because there were a generation of coaches that they wanted a level playing field. Because they knew some people in their conference were cheating, and they wanted to bring them back. But they also wanted to have other teams in their league be on a level playing field because they didn't fear competing on an even playing field. Right now, the key for conference commissioners and how they're judged, and this is not it's just how much money can the commissioner of this conference get for his schools, and is it more than the other ones? Because if it is, then he wins, or whatever the case may be. So we've kind of lost track of keeping the game healthy nationwide and making as level playing field as we can.
Yeah. You see it's some interesting jockeying between the SEC and Big Ten, because again, they're kind of coming alongside each other. Clearly, the 2 power conferences, they'll hold hands, and then you turn around and hear something like, "Oh no, they're going to be head to head on this one again, competing, like you said, for who is top dog, who is getting that money, who's going to sign the first deal." So it is fascinating from that standpoint. Well, about 10 years ago, not even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, you started to peel back the curtain on kind of what's gotten us to this standpoint with your book Hot Seat. Give us a little background on Hot Seat, and then kind of leading into your new book Blitzed here.
Well, Hot Seat was really, it started out as people always ask about, what's it really like? What's going on recruiting and all. And so over the years, you see a lot of stuff and a lot of stuff that people on the outside go, what? That's real? I mean, I coached with a guy at UConn who had been at TCU, and he talked about sitting in in a hotel room near a Mississippi Junior College with 50 grand in a bag, brown paper bag, to go get players. And, they carried guns because, you're traveling around with 50 grand back in the 70s and 80s. That's serious cash. And, but all these kinds of stories I would tell people, right? And so someone said, you ought to write a book. So I sit down, I'm starting to make notes. I'm saying, well, this happened at this school. And I said, well, the minute I write this manuscript or the draft, it's going to be, lawyers are going to be pouring all over it. People are going to be like, oh, I didn't actually do that, or that didn't happen. So I said, I'm going to write this as a work of fiction. So it's really what I call nonfiction fiction, which it's all based on true stories. So I said, I'm going to take someone through, and I used Ohio State because I recruited the state of Ohio for 17 years and had real familiarity with the geography, the schools, and Ohio State. So I'm going to make it about Ohio State, because that may be the toughest job in the country. If not, it's 1A. But the point is this coach loses to Michigan and then loses his bowl game. And the morning after the bowl game, the president of the university comes in and says, you've got 1 year to win or you're out. He said, I can't hold off my board of trustees anymore. There are certain people that want you out. So it takes you through. The guy has some ethics, and he's trying to stay within what he thinks is right or wrong, and maintain his job. And, there's temptations to buy this recruit, buy that recruit. Does he give in on this? Does he do certain things ethically that he shouldn't do, or unethically, I should say, that he wouldn't do? So it takes you through that. And then when that book was finished, people started to email me and, hey, what happens next? What's going on? What happens to this guy next? So I waited a year or two to start working on it. And at that point, NIL and the transfer portal and everything had really come into it. And I had been consulting on NIL stuff for 3 or 4 years at that point. So I had talked to people all over the country. So I had stories all over the place, and I put that in the book Blitzed. And not only that, just in terms of transfer portal, NIL money, the kinds of things that happen on and off the field that coaches have to deal with it, or even more intense now, because everything a player does, if they stub their toe, somebody has it on video somewhere and they post it. And if the phone rings at 12:30 at night, it's not your academic advisor congratulating you because 14 guys made Dean's List. It's that kind of pressure that goes on, and the mental health part of it, with players dealing with the NIL pressures, as well as coaches dealing with the constant pressure. So all that stuff comes into the book.
And that's the stories that are going to come out of this one. Again, it will truly be, again, that's not real. Like, nah, he fibbed a little bit. He, towed the line. But having sat in scouting meetings and hearing some of these, firsthand, again, I can't imagine, again, even some of these, you're probably almost wondering, hey, I've got to almost pull back a little bit to make sure it seems realistic. Because again, truly, I'm sure some of the story. What's one of the better stories in your book that people, maybe give us a preview, or kind of what's one of the good ones that, people aren't going to believe this one?
Well, you have these collectives that got involved, and when you look at the collectives around the country, it's attracting the lowest common denominator in some of these, where you have what we call hangers on, people that want to be around the program and they want to be big shots and act like team owners. And you have a lot of people that are involved. And you had one where, a woman running the collective was rumored to have been, have guys living in her house rent free, and the relationship going beyond that to being inappropriate, and a head coach being notified of it and saying, what do you want me to do? A player's mom is saying, this woman's posting pictures that are inappropriate with my son, and he's on your team, and you got to get her this. And he, just throwing his hands up and saying, what do you want me to do? This person's involved in the collective or gives a lot of money, and it's an NIL deal kind of things. But those are some of the things that go on. And that's happening, and in terms of also where you have boosters that put up money for a player and the player doesn't start. Now they're calling the head coach and saying, hey, I put up, X amount of dollars for you to get this guy and he's not playing. Now I look like a jackass to my friends. I wanted to play, or hey, the next time you wanted me to give money, I want to look at film of the guy and judge him myself. I mean, these are all the things that are creeping into the game, and it's for a head coach, it's got to be maddening.
Yeah.
Jay, you obviously are very.
And people would say that can't be real. No, it's real. It is absolutely real.
I'm sitting here listening to myself, and Rodrik and I both hear the stories firsthand anyway. Would you say because maybe collectives are a little bit less powerful because we have this new revenue sharing, are things more stable now than they were when things first started off, or because the money's getting out of hand, would you say it's less stable than when we first started with the transfer portal kind of in the modern reality of it?
On paper, it should be more stable, okay? Because you have this clearinghouse where you're supposed to put the deals in through, and they look at it and say this is not fair market value. All that means is you're going to have a lot of deals that don't get reported. It's no different than it was recruiting 30 years ago. You know, yeah, I can give them room board, books, and tuition, but somebody shows up with a bag of cash, and it's, you know, that's going to start to come back in this thing again. And anybody that doesn't think so, it's naive. I mean, you know, when we started first talking about NIL stuff, and even at our trustee level when it was new, you know, it was like, well, this will happen. I said, you guys don't understand. Coaches, and I said, having been one, we spend all of our life looking for the loophole. Where's the hole in the defense, or where's the hole in their pass protection? Or what does it, you know, it says I can't do this in recruiting, but can I do this? And so, you know, there are a couple NCAA rules that went into effect because of things we innovated at Penn State. And because we said, oh, well, we could do this. Well, other people don't want to do it. They turned in the NCAA and well, they say it's not against the rules. Well, let's pass a rule against it. You know, they used to be able to bring recruits in on private planes. Well, you know, Lloyd Carr didn't like the fact that, you know, Oregon had a private plane at their, you know, at their beck and call anytime they wanted to bring recruits in. So he was one of the guys that fought to get rid of the private plane. It helped that he was sitting with Detroit Metro Airport, which was an international, not only national, but international hub. So any major city, kids could get there on one flight. Flights like State College, they got to connect through somewhere. So everybody finds that advantage or whatever, or that loophole, and that's what they do. And that's what's going to happen as soon as you set up certain rules, then they go around. Now, if you have collective bargaining, like the NFL, you break the rules in the NFL, you get hammered to no end. You lose draft picks, you get fined. And I think until we get to that point, everybody's going to continue to find their way around it. Now, a lot of collectives are coming in-house, so there is a little bit more regulation on it, but the bags of cash they're going to start to reemerge.
Yeah. Yeah, I think with all the, again, you mentioned it earlier, the gambling, what that has done to the game. There were, of course, some reports after the NBA and everything that's happened there. People are like, oh, this is actually happening with college football too. Again, players getting paid off the books outside of that revenue sharing. It's like, again, my initial reaction was, yeah, like obviously, is anybody really surprised by this? The gambling at the collegiate level, again, forget everything with, again, we'll call it correct and regulated NIL and correct and regulated, stuff with student athletes. The gambling thing, again, it's not just, again, a professional thing now. If we're going to say at this point, we're going to try and say, hey, these are still college student athletes gambling. Are we going to see, with probably the pushback that's going to happen because of this, big sting operation, are we going to see a pushback at the collegiate level where, hey, let's take that off of some of, again, your overs, your unders, your lines in the college game that could potentially help everything?
Well, I think the prop bets have to go. That's number one. There's some states where you can prop bet on college players. I mean, that's number one. Number two, then you turn around, look around, and the NCAA just voted to allow college athletes and administrators and coaches to bet on pro sports. And I go, who thinks this is a good idea? Like honest to God, like you literally sit there and say, you guys, and then 2 days later, the NBA thing. And let's not pretend that, Abdul Carter just left Penn State. And I'm just going to use him as an example, not in any way, shape, or form implying anything. But, there are guys on the team at Penn State. If Abdul Carter's prop bet is, 2.5 sacks or a sack and a half, whatever it is, or whatever it may be, And he's texting with his buddies on the team now. And he says, yeah, I got an ankle. I'm probably out. Well, guess what? 40 guys in that team are going to know that inside of 2 seconds, and guys on campus can know that. But they're allowed to bet on it. So, I mean, you're putting yourself at risk again. So, it's every time, every 15, 20 years, we kind of forget history and we allow certain things to happen. When I was still coaching, they passed a rule allowing college athletes to have summer, to work during the year. And never forget, Joe comes in and says, you're going to have some car dealer setting up commissions for players and they're going to make 20 grand selling $100,000 car. And sure enough, you had something happen. I think it was Oklahoma, where you had 5 or 6 guys at a car dealership, and a Texas A&M alum, I think it was, at that dealership turned it in. But I mean, these are the kind of things that, the more we think things are new, the more, they're not that different. And, I go back to, I've got a book that I have that was written in 1927 or 28 by Amos Alonzo Stagg. And he talked about back then that there were guys on teams that schools were literally paying mercenaries. Guys would be on 2 teams within a year. And they were just bringing these guys in to play for the glory of the school, that alums were paying them to play. And that, they weren't even really students. Some of them weren't even enrolled. So you look at that and go, yeah, here we are 100 years later, and we're kind of back to that same square.
Yeah, certainly. The that alma mater element, again, it's something that, again, we can kind of bring it back around to, again, potential Penn State head coaching candidates, and for all these other schools, your Floridas, your LSU's now. Again, that alma mater element is always something that is unique about the college landscape. Is, again, however, for so many people, it is so important. You live, you breathe, you die. Your car is probably that color. Your paint scheme in your house is probably that color. You've got a whole room in your basement that color. That alma mater, it is what makes college football and college athletics so unique and so important, but again, drives so many people to, again, as you start to talk about getting a little bit past that ethical and moral line. Again, talk about how, again, even as a trustee, you absolutely want to live on that and pray on that and promote that, but at the same time, going too far gets you down that slippery slope.
Oh, there's no question. I mean, the thing about it is it's not like, if the Cowboys drive you nuts, you can walk away from the Cowboys and you pretend you never rooted for them. But if you went to Penn State, or you went to Texas, you went to Alabama, you've been identifying, that's part of your DNA, and you can't get away from it. There's just no 2 ways about it. So that there's that element that draws you in there. And that makes you also very impatient. And because of social media, and because of everybody talks so much smack on social media, and they troll each other, and you know what? No one likes to get buried by the trolls when they lose. So it becomes this almost an ego thing, a macho thing. My school's better than yours, rather than saying, well, you know what? I mean, nobody enjoys and relishes the competition anymore like they should. Sometimes it's just, my first year at UVA, we were number 1 in the country when I was coaching, and we played Georgia Tech, and they beat us. Georgia Tech went on to win the national championship. One of the great football games I've ever been around. Yeah, I was mad at the moment. But, as I got 6, 7, 8 months out from it, you sit there and go, what an unbelievable football game. And how, just there's nobody values the honor in playing valiantly and having a great football game unless you win. And if you don't win, it's not acceptable enough. And the other team's going to, you see more, the celebration has gotten, like, I'm an old school guy, our guys used to hand the ball to the official after they scored, which was a sign of respect to the official, sign of respect for your opponent. And also, I used to tell guys, well, if you hand the ball to the official, there's no question as to whether you fumbled it or whether, as long as you end up and you're standing on 2 feet after the whistle's blown in your hand to him, nobody can say you lost the ball. So, I mean, that was all part of it. But that element, the NFL element, at least college, it was for a while, you had to celebrate on your own sideline. Now they're letting them kind of flow right down the end zone like they do in the NFL now. So, I mean, and that just creates resentment. It creates these things that lead to fights and that kind of stuff.
You don't like the big turnover chains and the dunking of
No,
basketball.
no,
I mean,
When you get the turnover, it means somebody else to help do the job. The pass rush got there, or whatever it is, or there was a chain here for guys when they scored touchdowns at Penn State. I'm like, yeah, the offensive line should put that on. That stuff drives me nuts.
Yeah.
You're preaching a converted here,
Like
Jay.
I said, I'm an old school guy, and especially a place like Penn State. Miami started that crap. And if you go back to 1986 when I was a freshman, I mean, if you had said we're going to start doing something Miami did, people would have thought it was heresy because we ended up beating them for the national championship and the whole 9 yards. And there's kind of been those, the antithesis of each other.
Yeah. I could only imagine.
The clouds ourselves, Jay. So yeah, we're old men. We got all
Yeah.
old school.
I could only imagine, Coach Joe Paterno getting his hands on some of these guys at practice after they drop the ball before crossing the goal line. Because again, it's not just that we need to get there and celebrate. We got to start celebrating early, right?
Oh, I mean, how that never fails to amaze me. Like, I can't wait to celebrate. Like, honest to God, guys, how hard is it to take 3 more steps?
Yeah.
Like, you should have the ball in your hands. You should make sure the pylon is like that. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah, certainly. Well,
all right.
Go ahead, Neil.
Jay, you coached for a long time. Best player you coached against.
Oh my God. Geez, if I say best player I coached, my phone will ring if anybody sees this. So I don't get in trouble.
We're not trying to call anybody out here.
No. I think I've been around some great, obviously, not just the quarterbacks that I coached, but also other guys. But I mean, like, you look at a guy like Michael Robinson, who, we won the Big Ten in 2005, coming off 2 really bad seasons, and he really had a hand in that. And he was a guy that just had incredible leadership skills. Guys Shane Conlon, who I played with, was one of the great football players I've ever been. And like I said, the minute I name one or two, I'm going to leave out a bunch of guys. But there were so many great ones at Penn State, and really lucky. And on top of that, one of the other things that was really fun at Penn State is the last 10 years I was there, we had 11, 12 walk-ons that came here and played multiple years in the NFL. It's fun to watch those guys. In terms of best guys I ever coached against, oh, geez. Ohio State had some great defensive units. Mike Doss was one of those guys that, I tried like crazy to get him to come to Penn State. He would have been a great Penn Stater. He was a great football player. I remember Cameron Hayward, you had to literally game plan for him. Brandon Graham at Michigan. I mean, I could just go on and on with those guys. In terms of that's as an offensive guy. And I'm not going to sit there and say I thought he was going to be what he became. But watching Tom Brady his senior year from a distance and knowing that he wasn't the guy anybody wanted, but watching the confidence with which he played. And he came to Penn State and we were up 10, and he took them on 2 scoring drives to beat us against a really, really good football team. And I remember our wide receiver coach, Kenny Jackson, and I both said, that guy's going to be something. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I said he's going to go win 6 Super Bowls or what's he at 6 or 7? I can't remember. But I don't even, he may not remember, but there was a guy that you knew had something different. I mean, and then he got drafted late. Russell Wilson was a late draft pick, but watching him on the field, you thought he had something special about him. But, it's easy to say that all in hindsight. Yeah. Saquon Barkley was a 3-star recruit. And if you go back and check those sites, they've all moved him to a 4-star recruit. It's hilarious. A little revisionist history by them. Yeah. It's fun to watch those guys. And I'm sure I forgot some. As soon as I hang up, I'll go, oh, yeah, I forgot about this guy, that guy.
Yeah. Well, again, Penn State, even with, again, not being able to get over the hump, James Franklin has brought in a bunch of dudes. You've got first-round picks every year. This was a team that, again, maybe overhyped, maybe projected to be a little bit stronger than they were, still has a bunch of good players on their team, still a recruiting hotbed, still going to do a lot of those things right. This coaching hire that you guys make, again, there's never not a big one. Again, you've got to get this one right. In today's day and age, where with the transfer portal and recruiting combined, you can turn around a team fairly quickly. How close is Penn State, and what is the expectation for the next head coach at Penn State?
Well, I think we're closer than people realize. I mean, we're 3-4, but we've lost 4 games all by 1 score. And if we make a stop against Oregon, we win that game, and there's no telling how different this is. On the same token, in the off season, because as I mentioned, I do a TV show. In the off season, when I was getting ready for the season TV show, I went back and I said, Penn State was in this national semis. Okay, they finished 11-1 in the regular season, lost the Big Ten championship game. But if you look at it, there were 3 games in there: USC, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, that they were one play from losing. And if you don't have Tyler Warren, you don't beat USC. I mean, that was one of the most incredible individual efforts I've ever seen. So I looked at it and said, this team is every bit as close to being 8-4 as they were to being in the national semis. And I'll never forget Tom Coughlin. They won the Super Bowl, and I'm going to misremember the year. But they won the division. They were 9-7, won the Super Bowl. And the next year, some reporter asked a question about what is your team possibly, Super Bowl champions? What kind of things do you think you have to work on? And he goes, we were a 9-7 football team last year. So there's a lot we got to work on. So I looked at this team and said, the hype is probably outrunning the reality. But that said, I thought, they could win. I thought they could win, go 10, 11 wins, hoping they get Oregon at home, and then maybe necessarily beating Ohio State on the road, whatever it is, because it's hard to go undefeated. I mean, we're going to be 12-0. It is so hard to run the table anymore. It's always been hard, but I thought that, there was a lot of good players in place, maybe not as highly. The media will say this guy's a can't miss first round pick. When you talk to NFL guys whose job's on the line, they'll go, I'm not so sure on that one.
Yep.
So, I mean, there was some hyping, and it became this echo chamber with people that covered the team that this guy's got to say more, but Drew Aller's going to win the Heisman. This Nick Singleton's going to win the Heisman. And it was all these things going on, and the odds. And you just start to say, you look at the top 25, the AP top 25 in the preseason. 11 of those teams aren't ranked right now. And that means there's 11 teams that are ranked that nobody thought was worth it, going to be worth it. And there's probably 2 or 3 teams that weren't ranked, like Washington and some other people that should be ranked, that weren't ranked in the preseason. So, I mean, until you play the games, you just don't know. And every team's chemistry is different.
Yeah.
You don't get to start, when you finish on third base last year, you don't get to start on third base this year.
Yeah.
Now that's a perfect segue for kind of what my next question was. We have Penn State and LSU don't have head coaches right now. We have Texas, which has really struggled. Meanwhile, Vandy's in the top 10 and Georgia Tech's undefeated. Is that better for college football, that kind of volatility, or is it better when the tradition?
I think there's a little bit of both. I mean, the good thing about, when the traditional teams are good, they get a lot of eyeballs. When you look at the viewership numbers for a school like Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Texas, they're much higher than you're going to get for Vanderbilt because they don't have that built-in. You look at a school like Penn State, we have 700,000 living alums. I'm sure Vanderbilt's not even close to that. I wouldn't know their number, but it's a much smaller school, so they don't have that kind of. You look at a school like Virginia this year, where I started my coaching career. They're having a great year. They're sitting at number 15 right now. They're in the hunt for the ACC title, but the viewership doesn't reflect that because they don't have that built-in tradition. That a lot of UVA alums don't schedule their Saturday afternoons around what time the game is. Now that'll with success that starts to develop, and that's no way to be critical. I'm married to UVA. I'm married to a UVA alum, so I got to be careful saying anything about them. But you get the point. Is that it's good for the game when some of the blue bloods are really, really good, but it's nice to have some change up and some mixture in there. And it's been fun to watch those teams play. I mean, Vanderbilt's really dynamic, fun to watch play. Georgia Tech, I mean, they just continue to find a way to win. It's fun to see those teams in there. And BYU with a quarterback wearing number 47 last week. I mean, that's just an ugly. You got to love the guy's name, Bear. But, I mean, what an ugly numbered quarterback.
Well, almost as ugly as
horrible.
Almost as ugly as that Michigan quarterback wearing 99 for
yeah. Oh yeah, Devin Gardner. That was he had a reason behind it. I'm sure that BYU has a reason behind it, but God, that's just some
doesn't make it look any better, does it?
I remember Flutie wearing 22 was like, wait, what's that? And I love Flutie. I was a big fan of Flutie, but him wearing 22 seemed odd.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh shoot. Probably James Franklin. I'm going to say just because he's from Penn State, and but no offense to Brian Kelly. I don't know. I mean, it's hard. He's got the injury. There's going to be some question marks there. But I hope so. I mean, I really wish him all the best. But again, I'm never sure what the NFL guys are looking for anyway.
Especially at quarterback.
No, exactly. But I think one of the things about the quarterback position that's changed is people are looking for the more mobile guy. And every defense coordinator will tell you the first two things they look at: can the quarterback run and throw, and do you have a wideout that can beat me all day? Because if you have those two things, a whole bunch of stuff comes off the table in your defensive packages.
Yeah.
But that said, Drew did a much better job on the scramble this year and really played his butt off. Those three losses he was part of, he was not the problem.
No.
Doesn't sound like it. I don't. He sounds like a guy who's loving life right now, and a wife that's really happy with where he's at, and happy wife, happy life.
Yeah.
I mean, would I like to see him coach again? Yeah, because I think he's good for the game. He has a perspective on the game. I think Urban Meyer I'd love to see coach again, but I talked to Urban a bunch, but I'm not. I don't want to put any pressure on him by saying that. But look at a guy like Pat Fitzgerald. Pat Fitzgerald should be back in the game.
He should be.
I mean, there's a guy that what they did to him was wrong. They admitted they got it wrong, but there's a guy that, on top of more importantly, is a really a heck of a football coach. So, everybody gets caught up in who you're going to hire. There are a lot of great coaches that you don't even know about.
Yep.
If you would turn the clock back 4 years and Penn State was looking for a coach, and somebody brought up Dan Lanning's name as the coordinator of Georgia, people wouldn't be happy with that pick. And now everybody would take Dan Lanning. So you just never know. There's some guys that you just and I'll leave you with this last story. A lot of football guys used to be ADs, and they would call coaches and say, "Hey, who can coach? Who can't coach?" And it's kind of how Dan Lanning got to Oregon. They did their due diligence and did their homework. It's worked out really, really well for them. But Penn State goes undefeated in 1968. Don Cannon's the AD at Michigan. He calls up Joe Paterno and says, "I'd like to meet you in Pittsburgh and talk about our job." So Don Cannon offers him the job. And Joe says, "Look, I got some great things at Penn State going on. I think I can do really well here. It's, a unique place." And so he says, no. Well, a couple of days later, Don Cannon calls him and says, "Hey, what do you know about a guy named Bo Schembechler?" And Joe goes, "I don't really know him well. Why do you ask?" And he said, "Well, Woody Hayes told me." Now, Bo was the head coach of Miami, Ohio at that time. Don Cannon says, "Woody Hayes told me he's the best assistant coach he ever had on his staff." And Joe said, "Well, if Woody Hayes said that, Woody doesn't lie. He's you better hire him." And when Michigan hired him, the headline Detroit Free Press said, "Bo who?" And that's an example of an AD doing their due diligence and coming up with somebody that maybe the fans aren't excited about right away, but over time, you go to Michigan, there's a statue of Bo Schembechler there now.
Yeah. Well.
No question about it. But it's even you look at Lloyd Carr, he was made the interim coach, and the AD at Michigan called Joe to ask what he thought, and Joe said, "I wouldn't make him the interim. I think that's not fair to him." And he was the interim for a while, and then they gave him the full-time gig, and he won a national championship. So
yeah, well,
I think tell Joe to stop giving him Michigan advice.
Yeah. I think two nice pieces that we can kind of wrap on. ADs across the country have their due diligence. Again, yep. LSU, Penn State, again, obviously are, and all these other schools with head coaching vacancies, and maybe for fans, just give it a little bit of time. There's going to be some breakneck reaction to every one of these hires, no matter how good on the surface or how bad on the surface it seems. There's a reason. Hopefully good reasons all these guys get hired wherever they're at. And again, plenty of good stories like Bo who to kind of teach people lessons. But Jay, this has been fantastic. Whether it's Paterno Legacy, your first book, or Hot Seat Blitzed, where can people find the books? Where can people find more about you? Are you active on social media? Are you out there putting anything out there? Where can people find you?
Well, I've got a website, jvpaterno.com. That's Jay, my middle initial V, paterno.com, because somebody already owned jpaterno.com, and I was going to give them a chunk of change for it. But jvpaterno.com. I'm on Twitter at jpaterno. I'm on Instagram at jvpaterno. But you can get the books on my website. You can get the books at Amazon, bookstores, wherever books are sold, you can get it. And encourage people to go out and read, because there's some really good stuff in some of these books.
Yeah, there's always, again, every guest, if they have recommendations on books, again, it is what almost anybody in a successful seat somewhere tells you, hey, they need to read more, do more. So again, some great books, go pick them up. Jay, this has been fantastic. Good luck to you. Good luck to Penn State. Not only this week, but in the hiring cycle. We really appreciate you being on.
Appreciate it very much. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thanks. Agents, before we go, make sure you go check out Agent Live 360. It is at agentlive360.com for everything you need for your agency, from players to coaches, managing profiles, tracking invoices, sending invoices, getting paid, keeping up on every element of your entire agency. Notification emails, file, folder, storage, ROI, transactions, invoices, calendar, contracts, teams, reps, everything all in one spot for you. That is Agent Live 360. Hop on, request a demo. Yours truly will hop on, walk you through it. I can promise you we will talk some football as well. Sign up now with code TRIAL90 for a 90-day, 3-month trial at just $10 a month for Agent Live 360. That's at agentlive360.com. Go check it out now.